ज्योतिस्तामसः परमुच्यते ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं ज्ञानगम्यं हृदि सर्वस्य विष्ठितं सर्वस्य चाहं हृदि सन्निविष्टो मत्तस्मृतिर्ज्ञानमपोहनं च वेदैश्च सर्वैरहमेव वेद्यो वेदान्तकृद्वेदविदेव चाहं वादः प्रवदतामहं श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः. Okay, so before we proceed, some quick recap of what you recollect from yesterday's session, some core ideas, um, terminologies, some important concepts. Right? Bhakti, Shruti, and Yukti. And can you expand that in a sentence? What does apti mean? When we call something as
valid source.
yeah, that's one way of validating. So, but when will something be called an apta vachana? What are the criteria to say that it has apti?
Right author, right audience, right context.
Great. So vakta, shrota, and prasanga being favorable. So that is one way of validation. That is apti. Then other um, modes of validation.
Shruti and Yukti.
And what were those connoting? So what was the difference between apti and shruti?
Uh, Shruti means the source is like unauthored, but it's a reliable source.
But unauthored is very specific to the shastric context. But when if you want to apply it in general, peer-reviewed, communitized, more author-independent, institutionalized, right? Okay. The third one,
Yukti, logic.
logic. So basically, when we look at a statement or a source text, we look for its validity through the kind of author, audience, or context, or the original source from which it is getting derived, or the logical tenability of that content that's being delivered. Okay. Next ideas that you can recollect? Great. And what's that framework?
Uddesha, Lakshana Vibhaga Pariksha.
Fine. So quickly, what is Uddesha?
Labeling.
Label. Give a name to the idea. Then Lakshana,
Lakshana is definition or identity.
identifier. So what does it have? I mean, how do how do we say that something is a Lakshana?
It should cover all the constituents and it should not cover any constituent outside.
Correct. So if we have these two criteria in mind, so there is a set that we are trying to define. It has some n elements. So the attribute that we choose should talk about all the elements in that set and does not include any other element outside the set. So, and we said avyapti, ativyapti, if these criteria are not met. Okay, fine. So with that, let's move on to the discussions on debates and how do we use these frameworks that we have identified till now to understand what is katha. Katha is debate. Katha is not the stories that we, that's also another meaning. Ramayana Katha, Mahabharata Katha, Bhagavata Katha, etc. But in the context of epistemologies, Katha refers to debate. Okay, so now that we know how a definition or a lakshana should be, can we come up with a proper definition for a katha or for a debate? Okay. So just keep those things in mind. Look for some attributes. With those attributes, we should be able to cover. We know what a debate is already, right? I mean, we know, though we haven't thought of that as a in a systematic way with these attributes, etc. We know how a debate happens, what is a debate. But if we want to discover that lakshana, what will those attributes be so that it is present only in katha and not elsewhere? Let's do that activity, and then you will understand both what debate is and what is proper lakshana.
Next should be generation of knowledge or to
Okay.
reach knowledge.
So no, so let me frame my question. Give me a sentence that defines the katha. For example, if I had asked you, if you remember yesterday's conversation, give me an identifier of a jiva or a living being. How do you say that? You have to say, well, this is any object that has movement and that has movement not driven by mechanical and electrical things and also replicates, etc., is a living being. Okay, so that is the full lakshana vakya. So in the same way, can we think of a proper sentence that defines a katha?
Identifying a lakshana and then thinking about whether there can be errors in that. Asambhav,
That's right.
avyapti, atya.
Correct. So for a katha, come up with that kind of a definition. Yeah.
Is something like the two person are, one person is in favor and other in the opposite of that,
Okay.
and they are debating on particular topic.
You shouldn't use the word debating because we are defining debate.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are discussing on a particular topic
Okay.
to conclude to some solid they want to some out of it, that what for what they are talking about. discussing
Okay.
about.
Excellent. So you're basically saying it is two people talking.
People discussing about a topic, particular topic,
Okay.
so as to get conclude, so as to get something out of it,
Okay.
which to I think which will be beneficial for the society and all and all.
Okay. So you're seeking, so basically two people discussing an idea, seeking truth from that discussion is how you're trying to formulate. Let me give an example where this may not work. So then you may have to refine. So for example, in a courtroom, so you have defense lawyer and a prosecution trying to debate in a way, right? So you're putting your arguments and the other person is also putting their arguments. Is it truth seeking that is in the minds of these two lawyers, or to ensure that their party wins or is defended, whatever the truth may be? I mean, those who are defending a criminal may perhaps know the truth, but they want to show that your evidence is insufficient or there are some loopholes, etc. So the goal there is victory over the other person, not truth seeking per se. Vijay is the goal, motto. So your definition becomes avyapt if you use yesterday's terminology. So if you say that the definition of a katha is that there are two people talking about an idea with an intention to find truth, then a courtroom debate may not fall in this category. And should we then consider that as not a debate? We know that it is a debate. So how do we reformulate this definition to cover that? You're getting the point, right? So And also, let's say two siblings in a house, two toddlers, 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, are fighting on a topic. So apply your definition. So two people are talking about an idea to get something out of it. So is that a debate? Your definition covers that. But do we have that as debate in our minds?
Sir, what I
So then it would mean that there is ativyapti also. So the definition that you gave is covering the kind of a verbal brawl or some fighting, that verbal fight between two toddlers may also have to be called a debate if we go by this definition. So there is a problem of both vyapti from courtroom and ativyapti into this kind of mundane things. So we need to be careful to avoid these. So how do we define debate then?
Sir, I am just curious that is debate really a quest to find truth? Because whenever we are debating, we are just trying to pour our comments. No, we never try to, like, there are several topics in which we have to argue for or against. No, we don't care that whether we are taking the whichever side we are taking, we are looking for truth. We are just trying to justify our propositions, right?
Exactly. So I mean, that's what I'm trying to ask. So I mean, they said it is for the benefit, it is for the intention of truth seeking. I gave one example of, well, courtrooms also don't necessarily seek truth. So, but that is also a debate. So how do you then, so now give me a definition that covers your kind of debate also, or the one that you have in mind. So how do we give one general condition or a statement that covers all kinds of debates you have in mind?
It's more like countering the others' opinions.
Okay.
By reasoning with your conscience.
Conscience, which would then make it somewhat closer to truth. Why do you need conscience to oppose? It can just be a reasoned argument.
With the help of the conscience, you can bring several examples, experiences to counter that person, right?
Sure, but when you add that as a condition, then if there is a debate which does not bring those ideas, then you may have to exclude them from the notion of debate itself. So there is no need to bring that condition. If it is there, fine, but even if it is not there, it can still be a debate, right? So I agree with your first point that the goal there is to counter or oppose another person's case with reasoning. But should it be with the purpose of truth seeking, or so do you have any purpose in mind, or purpose is irrelevant?
Sir, to this question, I would like to remind myself that toward the end of the debate, there is no a definite conclusion, right? If two parties are debating, each parties are said to summarize their conclusion, right? There is no unified conclusion that comes up from the two of them.
They may not agree. So I start with one position, another party starts with another position. We debate. The audience or the judge or whoever will be convinced of one. Otherwise, what's the fun? I start with mine and the other person starts with the other person's opinion, and we put our arguments, the other person puts their argument. Where is the debate there? So if one is not losing, I mean, they may not agree that I have lost, but there is some third person or the audience who will get an impression that someone has lost and someone has won. If that's not there, then how can it be a debate? Vijay is the main motto. So somebody should win. Okay. So getting all of these together, can we think of one proper definition? You're getting where I'm driving this at, right? So think of a set of attributes that do not have avyapti, ativyapti, and cover entire types of kathas, the debates that we know of. So it is, as mostly many of you said, there are multiple people involved. So that's one condition. It cannot be a one person talking. That I think we all agree that that cannot be a debate. That can be a lecture. That can be something that I'm learning on my own or rehearsing, but that's not called a debate. So you need multiple people. Second, is there anything that we need to add to the quality of those people for it to be called a debate? Great. So there should be some scholarship, some knowledge base on the basis of which they are talking. So it cannot be kids fighting. So that we don't call a debate, right? So and it cannot be the TV prime time debate, right? Which are called debate. So what's the problem there? Why can't we call that a debate? Though it's called or named so.
Maybe they are not factfully correct.
Correct. And more than that, I mean, do you get anything out of it in terms of who is winning over the other person? Someone is making their own case, and without actually point by point rebutting that, another person will make their own case, and there is no common ground. And sometimes both are speaking, and more than two people are speaking at the same time. Nobody can listen, etc., etc. So there are multiple issues that you can see in that debate, right? So that's not the debate we have in our minds. So we are talking about more than one person involved with scholarship and, let's say, civility broadly. And if there are 4 or 5 people on a panel discussion, that's also multiple people and or scholars and are talking with civility. So is that a debate? Great. So it is about one idea. So another condition that we need to add is that there is one idea about which they are talking, rather than each person talking about some completely different topics. So multiple people, scholarly, civil, on one idea. But that one idea, if two people are talking about that idea from the same lens, is that a debate? So it has to be two opposite or at least different views, right? But is that sufficient to call it a debate then? So I say one opinion, another person says another opinion. Is that good enough? Correct. So basically, if I paraphrase that, you're evaluating the two options in that process. So I have one opinion, there is an alternative opinion. I take that in my what we call purva paksha, in my kind of a priori possibilities, and reject them and say why those are wrong and why mine is correct, and the other person does similarly, right? So if all these are met, then we call that a debate. Are we mostly in sync with that? So this is how, in fact, technically in the Shastric texts talking about katha, people define this. So it's a collection of sentences, naturally. I mean, so it's a set of sentences, right? By authored, I mean not necessarily written, but uttered by multiple scholars. By scholars, we are not talking about necessarily a very great expert in that, but they know what they're talking about, and they're talking in a way that suits a scholarly discussion and not a prime time show, right? So and that evaluate the validity of various positions on a given topic. Would that makes sense to be defined as a debate, so that you don't find any ativyapti, avyapti, etc. So if you look at the Samskrita definition, I've just given an English translation there. So the two texts that deal with this greatly, one in the Nyaya tradition, the other in the Dvaita Vedanta tradition, in which I am trained. So Vachaspati Mishra's work on the Nyaya school. So Nana Pravatrika Vichara Vishaya Vakya Sandrubdhi. So there are a few terms there. I'll explain them. A very similar sentence in the next text is Aneka Vidvat Kartrikaha Vichara Gocharaha Vakya Prabandhaha Katha. So Vakya Prabandha is just some set of sentences, so that's easy to understand. But these two qualifiers are actually very interesting. So what they're saying is, so it is a set of sentences such that they are Vichara Gocharaha. So they're talking about one vichara. Vichara is further defined if you go, I think, to the third sentence there. Purvottara paksha balabala chinta vichara. So vichara is, it's a chinta, it's a discussion, it's a chintan. So a discussion that looks at the bala and abala, that is the prabalya and daurbalya, the superiority or inferiority, or the acceptability and unacceptability, the pros, cons, so whatever you can call. So of Purva Paksha and Uttara Paksha. Purvottara Paksha, bala, abala, chinta. So you have two possible opinions, a possible takes on a topic. So you look at the prabalya and daurbalya of those two ideas. So that is called vichara. So vakya sandrubdhi, or vakya prabandha, the set of sentences should be such that they are talking about one idea, and they are talking about that idea's possible alternatives, and looking at the prabalya and daurbalya of each position. Okay, so that is vichara. Then it just purvottara paksha. So if I had just vichara gocharaha vakya sandarbhaha, then if you apply all the lenses that or the frameworks that we had discussed yesterday, avyapti, ativyapti, etc. So if you just say a set of sentences that are talking about a vichara, which means they are talking about purva paksha, uttara paksha, the prabalya, daurbalya, etc., that is still not a debate, because I may write an essay that talks about, okay, there is one position like this, there is a second position like this, there are these errors in the first position, these are the possible responses in my position. That is an essay which talks about Purvottara Paksha Balabala. What are the problems, what are the fallacies, what is the good thing about my take, etc. But it is still not a debate, because multiple authors are not involved. So one person acting as a proxy for another is still not a debate. So you need that aneka kartrikatva. Therefore, that first qualifier there. So it is not just vichara gocharaha vakya prabandhaha, but it is also aneka kartrika. And it is not just aneka kartrika, aneka vidvat kartrika. Right? So, and there is an interesting explanation of that lakshana as to why you need each of these components. This in Samskrita Shastric studies technically is called the idea of dalakritya or padakritya. So you basically have multiple words in this lakshana, right? So lakshana vakya has 3-4 components there. It is a set of sentences, that's one component. Authored by multiple scholars is another component. So you have the component called scholars, you have a component called multiple of them, you have a component called they are talking about one idea, then another component of talking about the Purva Paksha and Uttara Paksha of one idea, and evaluating some. All these are multiple components that have come together to arrive at final definition. What is the relevance of each of these components? So that discussion is called dalakritya. So why do you need each of these components? What happens if I ignore one? What happens if I add more? So that is the lakshana's sophistication or revision that you need to do to come to one final lakshana. So we have arrived at this final lakshana. So now we have to check, do we really need all these components? So that's what those next sentences are doing. So so I'll just read out and give you a simple translation. You'll be able to appreciate what it is doing. So we said aneka vidvat kartrikaha vichara gocharaha vakya prabandhaha katha vaidushancha. What is the meaning of vidvat? Aneka vidvat kartrika is there. So the next sentence defines what is that vidvatta or vaidushya. Vaidushancha katha mahavakyasya nirvahakatvam. So there is one statement or an idea, mahavakya, that you are debating upon on. So your ability to handle that statement is your vaidushya. So vaidushya refers to, or vidvat in this context refers to your cognitive ability to handle the statement which is being debated. Because I mean, it is important to define this. You know, sometimes isn't an agriculturist or actual farmer on the ground a scholar in the work that he does? An expert in the work that he does, but may not be able to give an academic lecture on what he does. So, but that is not to say that the person is not a vidwan. So, but that vidvatta is not useful for debating context. So in the debating context, we are, because it has to happen through this articulation and fine tuning of words and finding fallacies. So that scholarship is not useful. So therefore, it is important for us to define the nature of scholarship we are connoting in this. So therefore, the definition of Vaidushya. Otherwise, you don't need to define what Vidvatta means. But these authors are careful to say, well, don't take any Vidvatta in this context. We are talking about specific Vaidushya. What is that Vaidushya? Ability to handle and articulate a statement at the debating desk. So Vaidushya is that. Then if you have that Vaidushya, tatascha swasthaha, a person needs to be healthy enough to be taking part in an actual debate. Sarvajana pratyayavalambi, so he accepts what is generally known by everyone. So is not contradicting the popular understanding about a topic if he is a scholar, right? So if persons come from idiosyncratic value systems, well, I believe in this, I don't care what anyone else says, such a person fails to be a part of a civil debate. So because I mean, there is no way you can counter that person, because he'll say, no, I don't agree with anything that anyone else is saying. So for a vidwan in this context has to be somebody who has this sarvajana pratyaya. Pratyaya is kind of vishwasa, or what everybody knows, I also accept that. Then savadhanaha, somebody who is attentive, so it listens to another person. Akalaha karaha, kalaha is fight. So those who are ineligible to be taking part in a prime time debate are eligible here, because you need to be a kalahakara there. In the sense, I mean, if you're not, so you don't, if you have the intention of fight, if you don't have the intention of fighting, then you become an eligible candidate here. So those are some, the characteristics of a vidwan in this context. So Vaidushya refers to ability to handle mahavakya, the statement under consideration. And that necessarily means that you are healthy enough, you accommodate the positions taken by everybody, and you are attentive, and you are not inclined to just fight. Then, so that defines vidvat. Then you have vichara. So you need to define that. So vichara refers to purvottara paksha balabala chinta. I already discussed that. So why do we need all of these? So that's the component analysis. So they say atra aneka kartrikatvoktiya eka kartrikebhyaha mimamsa vakyebhyo vyudasaha. So mimamsa vakyas, those are the essays that I mentioned. So there is this pura mimamsa, uttara mimamsa, or any mimamsa vakya, basically, which talks about the problems of one position and the greatness of another position, but authored by a single person. So what this sentence is saying is aneka kartrikatva uktya, that is by inserting the condition of multiple authors in the definition, we are excluding essays written by individuals which may satisfy all other conditions. So it may be about Purvottara Paksha Balabala Chinta, it may be about Vidvatta, all of that is there, but multiple people are not involved, and we don't call that a debate. So by adding this aneka, we have excluded ekakartrika mimamsas. And by adding vaidushya, vaidushyokya kalahadibhyaha, so people are fighting but not debating, and those are getting excluded when you have vidvat in the definition. So by adding that in the definition, you're ensuring that fights which may still be talking about validity of a position, but it is not in a vidvat driven atmosphere. So we are excluding that. And by adding vichara gochara, vidusham anyonya sukha vyavaharebhyah. So assume a condition, a situation where multiple scholars are present and multiple scholars are talking about an idea, but not about a vichara, like exchanging pleasantries. So all other conditions are not are met, but vichara condition is not met. So there is no discussion about one idea for its validity or invalidity, but there is an exchange of some pleasantries, and that we don't call that a debate. So we need to exclude that anyonya sukha vyavahara. So therefore we have added vichara gochara as a condition there. So, and this approach of defining one idea and checking why each component is required is actually called the idea of padakritya or dalakritya. Kritya is the purpose, dala is the component, or pada is each word. So why are those components required in getting the right lakshana? So that is the dalakritya. I mean, so just a simple English translation of whatever we discussed. So each component term in the definition is important, so that they resolve fallacies of avyapti or ativyapti. So if you take one very broad definition, you may end up in ativyapti. You are taking too many things in your basket. If you add too many conditions, you may end up in avyapti. So you need to get the right balance of not going outside of the set and not too much narrowing. So by adding these specific terms, so by adding the term multiple authors, we are excluding single person author texts. By adding the term scholars, we are excluding just the verbal prose, or then you have, by adding the phrase evaluating the validity, that is vichara gocharatva, we are excluding some casual talk of exchanging pleasantries. So now we know what is the debate in a proper sense. So is this okay? Any questions, any comments? Yes, please. Previous one. Yeah.
विषया वाक्य संदृप्तिः और विषय वाक्य संदृप्तिः.
Vishaya, I think it is striling sandrubdhihi.
विषया वाक्य संदृप्तिः. I mean, you would have compounded, right? So vishaya vakya.
But the vichara vishaya should become the adjective for vakya sandrubdhi.
Okay.
Because
it is, and it's a compound, right? Nana
I think that is
better.
Yeah,
Vishaya vakya sandruptihi.
I think you're right. That is perhaps the better one. I have to check. The original had two different readings, if I remember correctly. In which case it can be a compound word.
Sir, in that shloka you have mentioned, one is that the one who actually quarrels and who doesn't wish to take the other person's opinion. Sir, I think that is Vitanda, na? The person.
No, so we'll come to that later. Even Vitanda satisfies all these conditions. What we see today is not a debate at all. Vitanda is actually a type of debate. We will come to that. We will come to Vada Jalpa Vitanda.
Sir, इदानीं तत्र प्राबल्य दौर्बल्य कथं वा अस्माभिः निर्धारितुं शक्यते? प्राबल्यं वा इदमेव प्रबलम्
तत्तु प्राश्निकैः क्रियते।
प्राश्निकैः क्रियते वा, मध्यस्थैः क्रियते वा, अथवा सभापतिभिः क्रियते वा?
प्राश्निकैरेव कर्तव्यं किल। वादिभिः प्रतिवादिभिश्च प्राबल्यदौर्बल्यम् आक्षिप्यते, निर्णयस्तु प्राश्निकैरेव करणीयः।
तदा सभापतीनां पात्रः?
सभापतीनां तु जयपराजयघोषणादिपूर्वकं तेषां सम्मानादिकम् इत्येव।
वादः भवति तदा तत्र तु
वादे तु प्राश्निकानां सभापतीनां च आवश्यकता एव नास्ति। यदि ते दैवादागताः तर्हि तदा तैरपि प्रयोजनं तत्त्वनिर्णयविषये स्वीकर्तव्यं, न तु जयपराजयविषयनिर्णये इति सम्प्रदायः।
इदानीं पश्यतु, तत्र वादः प्रचलति। एकः आगतवान्, दृष्टवान्, पाण्डित्यं दृष्ट्वा किमपि दृष्ट्वा सः धनादिकं दत्तवान्। तत्र धनप्राप्तिरपि अस्ति, केवलं तत्त्वप्राप्तिर्नास्ति, धनप्राप्तिरपि अस्ति। अतः तत्र वादस्य
तदेव अधुना मया विव्रियते। सत्यं, तदेव विव्रियते मया। So one quick point on this, given the time constraint, I will not be able to talk more about pramanas, but because we largely mentioned that it is about pramana and katha, let me just spend a couple of minutes, but I'll spend more time on the katha. So these texts, the Nyayasara and Pramana Paddhati, deal extensively on the question of what pramana is. I mean, there are using that Uddesha, Lakshana, Vibhaga, Pariksha. What I just did was the Lakshana of Katha. Similarly, you can do an activity on what is a pramana. So we generally say evidence or proof is a pramana, but how do you precisely define? Just like what we did for Katha, how do you precisely define pramana? What are different types of pramanas? But so I'm not going into those details. That's another at least a few hours of discussions that we can have, but I'm just giving you a hint on what these courses or these texts do. Pramanya largely refers to the idea of, sorry, there is a typo, yatharthya. Yatharthya is as the object is. So if the tool that we are using, like our eyes, like the texts, which are giving us knowledge, if they are giving knowledge that is that resembles the reality of that object, then that tool is called a pramana. So if my eyes are giving me the knowledge about some objects there as they are, then my eyes are considered pramana. If my eyes are affected by, say, some jaundice, some cataract, whatever, then they are not pramana because the image is distorted. So what I am cognizing is different from the reality. So then it doesn't qualify to be called a pramana. Similarly, some inference that I make. So I see smoke, I infer that there must be fire. So that is a valid approach to arrive at a real object without actually seeing it. But I know that there is a relationship between dhuma and vanhi, smoke and fire, that has been established elsewhere. And I see smoke, even though I don't see fire directly, I'm 100% sure. It is not a probabilistic inference. I think we discussed this yesterday. None of the pramanas in the texts talk about probability. They are about yes or no. So it is either correct or incorrect. So only the correct knowledge is what we are talking here. So inference is a second type of pramana, which we call Anumāna generally. So Pratyaksha is direct perception. Anumāna is using a relationship to infer or arrive at another object. The third is through words, like the texts, like the apta vachanas that we talked about yesterday. So whether it is shastras or a railway timetable or court order or some law, all of these are giving us information on valid object through words. It is not something that we can directly perceive or that we can infer. So at what time is the train leaving from Haridwar to Delhi is known through that railway timetable. That is an agama. It is a text. It is a word giving us some data. So what is happening is in all of these, the common thread is they are yathartha jnana sadhana. They are instruments providing right knowledge. They are called pramanas. So broadly speaking, there are variations in terms of how many pramanas are there. Different schools subscribe to different philosophies, but will not get into that. At a broad level, pratyaksha, anumana, and agama, that is direct perception, inferential knowledge generation, then text-based or word-based knowledge is the broad categorization. If you apply that from a neurocognitive sense, you can see that in pratyaksha, you don't need to do anything. You just need to be attentive. Manasaha adhishthanameva avashyakam. Natu karanasya karanata jnanam. How does eye work? You don't need to know. If your eyes are there, if the object is there, and if you're attentive, it will give you knowledge. You don't need to be an ophthalmologist or an optics expert to know how it happens. Whereas in inference, it doesn't work like that. Only if you know the actual relationship and apply that relationship, only then it gives you knowledge. Presence of smoke does not give you the knowledge of fire if you don't know the relationship between smoke and fire. Whereas in perception, you don't need any prior knowledge. So in perception, it is just being attentive. In inference, it is applying something that you know. In agama, it is a training that you need. So you need to be trained in a language to understand what the person is telling. So you read some text, you learn from it. You know the language and you learn. So these are the three primary cognitive mechanisms in a way that give knowledge. So pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. There are some minor variations within them, so one is attentiveness. So for anumana, we require the knowledge of relationship. So we infer from object A the presence of object B. So by looking at smoke, I infer that there must be fire. So, but for this inference to work, I should know that this relationship exists. And so that I have established somewhere else. And I now see smoke and I recollect that relationship and then it works, right? So that is what you require in Anumana. In Agama, you require the knowledge of language, vocabulary, grammar, interpretation principles. So that's a very different ball game altogether. So how texts give you knowledge compared to how inference produces knowledge versus direct perception giving knowledge. So those are broadly three mechanisms. But just with that, we should be able to come back to the discussion on Katha. So this slide is just to motivate on what we were discussing. So don't give too much value to the definitions given here, which we will discuss in the next slide. This is to Krishna talking about Vada Pravadata Maham. I usually use that in the invocation also to say that this is a very old tradition, that there are multiple types of debates. And Krishna, when he says, I am Vada in all the kinds of debates, he's obviously implying that Vada is one type and there are other types also. So, which is what we are trying to look at. So popularly, there are these three types, Vada, Jalpa, and Vitanda. The Nyaya Shastra talks about it. All Vedantins usually agree to this classification. At a dictionary level, so if you look at Vada or etymological level, it usually, I'm not going into the technicalities, but at a broad level, Vada, Vivada, Samvada, which refers to discussion, some exchange of ideas. Jalpa is usually the talkativeness, Jalpana is sometimes called, the person is being very talkative. So that's the word in the sense in which Samskrita literature uses, not the technical Samskrita works, but in Sahitya, you see Jalpana, Jalpa as being talkative, Then Vitanda is coming from the word Tadana, where you beat someone. So essentially, these three are at a very superficial level, I will go to the technical details in the next slide. At a superficial level, talk about something connected to a conversation, exchange of ideas, and something connected to demolishing somebody. So all of these taken together, we have already defined katha in a proper sense earlier. At a broad level, vada is discussion, which is truth seeking. Jalpa is seeking victory, and vitanda is demolishing the opponent. So that's the broad connotation. I'll give more proper definitions in the next slide. So after 2-3 slides, we will open it up for discussions. So this is the description in the Gautama Nyaya Sutra on what vada, what jalpa, and vitanda are. Okay, so these are just 3 sutras. So just go through them and understand what they are trying to say about what is a vada, what is jalpa, and what is vitanda. Pramana tarka sadhana upalambhaha siddhanta aviruddhaha panchavayava upapannaha paksha pratipaksha parigrahaha vadaha is a definition in the Gautama Nyaya Sutra. Vada refers to this dialogue or a discussion which is such that there are 2 opposing views, paksha, pratipaksha, parigraha. So there are 2 opposing views, and people are trying to establish their own idea using pramana and tarka. Tarka in the Nyaya context refers largely to refutational approaches, pramana to establishing approaches. So one is sadhana, the other is dushana. So you're trying to establish yours and demolish the opponent. So you use pramana and you also use tarka. Through that, you do sadhana and upalambhasa. So you establish and you refute. How? Siddhanta aviruddha. You have one school of thought or one idea that you want to establish. So your conclusion should obviously be in line with that. So that is the process of vada. And there are 5 avayavas which I will be discussing later, but largely it is talking about 2 opposing views trying to establish their own view as the correct one. Both are doing sadhana and dushana. So both Vadi and Prativadi, let's call these 2 people as Vadi and Prativadi. So Vadi is trying to prove his point and disprove the Prativadi's point. Similarly, Prativadi is trying to prove his point and disprove the Vadi's point. However, Jalpa, so if you look at the differences, so those are the interesting ones. Yathokta Upapannaha, which is very similar to the above. However, you use Chala, Jati, Nigrahasthana, Sadhana, Upalambhaha, Jalpaha. So in Jalpa, you are doing exactly what is said in Vada. In addition, you use some techniques called Chala, Jati, and Nigrahasthana. I will explain all of them in the next slides. Just for a quick literal translation, you use some strategies that are not for truth seeking. So misrepresent the position of the opponent and win over the person. Use some tactics that will make the other person nervous in the debate and ensure that you do some psychological manipulation to win over. So those are the things that are allowed for a jalpa kind of an approach. And you may even contradict your own position in a way that the opponent does not recognize that contradiction. So there is this saying in all these texts where nishchita parajayat pakshikopi varaha jayaha. So when you know that you're necessarily going to lose, why don't you try something that even if there is some 20% chance that the opponent may not find out the strategy or misrepresentation that you have employed, there is a chance of you winning. So if you don't do that, you're anyway going to lose. So you do all kinds of things so therefore, this is not taking you towards truth, but this is giving you some hopes for winning. So that is the jalpa. So chala, jati, nigrahasthana, all are allowed. In the last one, vitanda, Pratipaksha sthapana hinaha vitanda. So, let's say one is Vadi, the other is Prativadi. Let's call one as Paksha, the other is Pratipaksha. So one view, another counter view. One of them, that is the Prativadi or Vadi, I mean, it's just X and Y. One of them is not required to establish that view, but only refute the view of the opponent. Such an arrangement is called Vitanda. So Jalpa and Vada, both of them have a requirement. I don't know what happened. Is that... I can continue now. Okay. So both Vada and Jalpa are, both parties are taking a position and they are required to justify their position and oppose the position of the opponent. Whereas in Vitanda, one of them is not worried about establishing his position, but only worried about rebutting the position of the opponent. So that is the nature of Vitanda. And we will, so any thoughts on why do we even need these two types of debates? One where both are trying to prove their point and disprove the other, whereas there is one special type where one is not required to prove their point, but only to rebut the point of the opponent. Any applications you see, any kind of debate where such a situation arises? Okay, but that's not a debate. We have already excluded that.
Those type of things, I think comes under those Vitanda.
No. But this Vitanda is a proper katha. It is within our definition of katha. So the TV debates, we have already excluded them out of katha. Because there is no one point that people are talking about, right? So the only difference between Vada Jalpa at one end, Vitanda at the other, is in Vada and Jalpa, both parties are establishing their views and countering the counter view. Whereas in Vitanda, one of them is not establishing the position of that person, but is only refuting the position of the opponent. Whereas the opponent is required to prove their point and disprove the counterpoint given. So this is the setup. This is the classification. Why do you need this kind of a complicated classification is the question. Do we see any application? Do you relate to any real life scenario where Vitanda is more helpful, or sometimes Jalpa is more helpful, etc. To influence a third party? You use what?
So Jalpa is also courtroom. In the courtroom example you have given for the victory,
yes,
there is the talk what happens between the jury.
Yeah.
That for the purpose of victory, that comes under the Jalpa, I think.
Okay. So there it is not necessarily truth seeking, though that may be the stated objective, but what the attorneys do is to ensure that they win. So it is Jalpa, I agree. Vitanda? Diplomatic talks. And what do you do there?
Trying to oppose, demean your nation, thing like
Yeah.
that. So we try to oppose or defeat that view.
And not necessarily reveal your position.
Yes.
So what is going on is, depending on the safety or the eligibility of the other party, so how safe is it to reveal your position, you make a choice. So is it good to reveal and win, so that, okay, this position is better, or is the threat more from the opponent, where the idea is to dilute that threat rather than revealing what we believe in is sometimes necessary, as in the case of some security things. Or I'll give you another simpler example. In the courtroom case itself, I don't know how many of you are aware, but I mean, we can think about it. There is a difference between civil proceedings and criminal proceedings. So what people do when there is a civil suit on, say, some ownership of land, okay, there are two parties trying to claim ownership on a given land. It is necessary for each of them to establish that ownership through evidence. Okay, here is some documentation, some data, etc., because of which I claim ownership. So you are doing sadhana of your paksha. So your paksha establishment you are doing. Similarly, the opponent will also do, and you show some loopholes in that documentation. Similarly, this guy will do. So both of them do swapaksha sthapana and pratipaksha nirakarana, right? In criminal proceedings, the role of defense lawyers is only to show loopholes in the prosecution's case, but not give an alternative. They don't have a theory of their own. So the prosecution has filed some case against someone. So you're defending the accused. While defending the accused, what you do, you show that the prosecution's case has these flaws. So my client is innocent. That's all. You don't give an alternative as to then who actually committed the crime. That's not your responsibility. That's the prosecution's problem. They have come up with some theory. You are showing errors in that theory to defend your client. So criminal proceedings are in a sense a vitanda, where for a defense lawyer, the goal is to show problems in the prosecution's case. There is no requirement to show another. But so what the prosecution does is to rebut these objections and say that no, mine is correct. So they are doing establishing their point and answering the objections, and therefore their role is both swapaksha sthapana and pratipaksha nirakarana, though there is no actual pratipaksha but only objections. For the pratipaksha or the defense lawyer, there is no need to give there another alternative, but just show that your theory has these logical flaws. And if you extend that into some kind of modern ideological or political debates, there are situations where one party believes that the opponent ideology is something that is dangerous to the society. So what you do there is, if you go and talk about your theory with the opponent, you believe that that may also get twisted and co-opted in a narrative that is going to be harmful for me. So I don't want to discuss my position with the opponent, but I want to show the errors in opponent's theory. So the point that you mentioned of helping the audience at large. So there may be different motivations for employing a vitanda approach. So you prove your point, I'm only going to disprove your point. Whereas if both of us are on some common page where there is no such fundamental mistrust or issues of security or kind of court case criminality issues, where there is no problem in revealing another position, so then both of them reveal their positions and oppose the opponent, then that becomes a jalpa. But even there, the goal is still victory, not truth seeking. If none of these are there, so where you're not threatened by the opponent and you're not even seeking victory, your goal is to find truth, then that becomes vada. Is that
Sir,
clear?
one thing,
Yeah.
if I wish to share, sir, if any debate happens between different religions,
Okay.
like Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianism, so all those things, if debate happens between them, then the output of that debate, to me, it is finding that it is coming under the Vitanda. Is it true? Matlab,
Why do you say it is coming under Vitanda?
because they might not accept the other ism's opinion, but rather they will review.
Then it can be jalpa also. Vitanda is when one of the parties is not revealing their position. But if both are trying to reveal their positions and counter the other, irrespective of the intent, what you are saying is at the end of the debate, the person may not agree, is the problem you are mentioning. So it can be jalpa. Because in jalpa, the goal is just to win. I win over you, but that person may not change. The person may continue to believe whatever he said was correct, but unfortunately that was a bad day, something didn't occur to me and the judge was partial, whatever excuse you may have. But so you come out and say, I lost the debate formally, but I still subscribe to the thoughts that I have. So that is still jalpa. Whereas in vada, you're trying to seek truth. You accept the position of the other independent of from where you started.
If I get lost also, I'm accepting the truth.
Correct. But so I don't worry about my ego, my ism, my whatever. So we do some truth seeking activity, and at the end of the debate we come to some common conclusion.
Yes, that is vada. That is a positive attitude approach.
Correct. So in those interreligious debates, depending on the intent of the participants, if the intent is I just want to win, I don't care about truth, then it is jalpa. If it is about truth seeking, then it comes under vada.
It will not come under vitanda. They will
not. So it can be called a vitanda if the situation is such that one of them thinks that it is not good to reveal their position, but only do a rebuttal of the opponent. Then it is vitanda.
According to the situation of that debate.
Correct. Yes, please.
Can we put it as similar to dialectic method of knowledge? That is the thesis, vad, antithesis, prativad, and synthesis, samvad.
Yes.
After some time, we find some error in the synthesis, then it becomes vad again.
Yes.
And there is a possibility to partivad.
Correct.
And then it goes to the samvad.
Correct.
So this is the process of purification ultimately.
Yes.
So is it is?
Yes. Very similar. The one caveat I would use is jalpa and vitanda do not come under that, because in the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, there is openness to accept the issues that are posed by the opponent and come to one common ground that is acceptable to both parties, that has accounted for the fallacies in each of these and has arrived at a more common ground situation. Though one difference is in the thesis, antithesis, synthesis formulation, synthesis is seen as a third position compared to thesis and antithesis. Whereas here you have only two cases. So you start with one position and there is an opposing view. So you, in thesis, antithesis, both lose technically. Both lose and both arrive at one third position. So there is a small difference. Perhaps, I haven't thought about this much, but perhaps the vada approach is a little more rigorous compared to a thesis, antithesis, synthesis approach, because in that you're not wedded to any idea, because of which you give up your position easily. So if the goal is, okay, let's come to some middle ground, then you don't go to the depths of the initial idea with which you started, because you want to come to some negotiated common ground. Whereas in vada, you fight it out till the end, that mine is the right position. Once you are defeated, you may still show that, well, your position, I accept my defeat, but your position seems to have some problems yet. I know your position is better than mine, but why don't we engage further and seek some clarity on what your position is? So the other person may also modify the position, and that may become synthesis in some sense. However, because you are not initially driven by the idea of synthesis, but driven by paksha and pratipaksha, you fight it out till the end so that one of them is correct. So therefore, the rigor is a little different in between a third possibility versus only two possibilities. That's how I look at it at this level. Yes.
उक्तं वादे तावत् तत्त्वनिश्चयः भवति इति।
हा।
तत्त्वनिश्चयः एव वादस्य फलं वा अन्यदपि अस्ति वा?
तत्त्वनिश्चयः मुख्यफलं, तत्त्वनिश्चयः एव उद्देश्यम्, अन्यदपि भवेत् किन्तु अवान्तरफलत्वेन।
एवं तत्र धर्म रिलिजियस् यदस्ति
हा।
तदपि जल्प वितण्डा मध्ये वितण्ड विभागे भवितुं शक्यते, यतोहि तत्त्व अप्रकाश एव जल्पवितण्डयोः फलम् इति उक्तम्।
जल्पवितण्डयोः न, वितण्डायाः एव। तत्त्वमेषु निगूहितम् इति तु वितण्डायाः लक्षणम्।
अप्रकाश एवैको वितण्डा जल्पयोः फलम् इति अनुव्याख्यानमस्ति।
तत्त्व अप्रकाश एव एक, तत्त्व अप्रकाशोऽपि भवेत्, किन्तु कथालक्षणटीकायां तत्त्वनिर्णयम् उद्दिश्य केवलं गुरुशिष्ययोः कथा, अन्येषामपि वादो वा समिते शुभा इत्युक्त्वा
इत्यत्र तदपि उक्तम् असतां वितण्डा असतां
सदसतोः यदि वादः भवति तत्र तत्त्वनिर्णयोऽपि भवितुं शक्यते।
स्वार्थं परार्थमपि च तत्त्वनिर्णयसाधिनी केवलं तु कथावाद जल्पो अर्थादि व्यपेक्षया सतामेव कथां ज्ञेया वितण्डात् असतां सताम् अप्रकाशस्य सिद्धान्तम् असतां पक्षदूषणम्।
हा, तत्तु वितण्डायामेव, किन्तु जल्पे तत् अत्र कथालक्षणटीकायाम् एवं निर्णीतमिति मन्ये। तत्त्वनिर्णय उद्देशेन प्रवृत्ता कथा वादः फलोद्देशेन कीर्त्यादिकमुद्दिश्य परपराजयं वा उद्दिश्य कृता प्रतिपक्षस्थापनहीना चेत् वितण्डा, अन्यथा जल्पः। किन्तु उभयोरपि तत्त्वनिर्णयोऽपि भवितुं शक्यते, किन्तु वितण्डायां स्वपक्षस्य प्रकाशः स्वतः न कार्यः इत्येव तत्र निर्णयः इति मन्ये। किन्तु तत्त्व अप्रकाशः जल्पेपि तस्य अभिप्रायः प्रायः छलजातिनिग्रहस्थानानामपि तत्र सम्भावनम् अस्ति इति मत्वा तत्त्वप्रकाशस्य नियमेन तत्त्वप्रकाशः भवितुं शक्यते इति न इत्येव अर्थः, किन्तु तत्त्व अप्रकाश एव भवेत् इति न मन्ये।
तत्र एवं निर्णीतुं शक्यते। वादे तावत् तत्त्वप्रकाशोऽपि अस्ति,
तत्त्वप्रकाश एव अस्ति,
तत्त्वप्रकाशोऽपि अस्ति तत्र अनुव्याख्याने वादे तावत् जयनिर्णय इति कारकः। वादे एव उभयार्थः स्यात्, निर्णेतिर्जयकारकः।
उभयार्थः इत्युक्तौ तत्त्वनिर्णयार्थः फलार्थश्च। हा, किन्तु तत्तु अवान्तरफलत्वेन सर्वत्रापि जयादिकं यदि जयः नास्ति, केवलं तत्त्वनिर्णयमस्ति, तत्रापि तस्य वादशब्देनैव व्यवहारः। अतः उभयकारकत्वं सर्वलक्ष्ये न विद्यते इति मन्ये। तत्त्व अप्रकाश एवैकः वितण्डा जल्पयोरपि इत्युक्तं भवद्भिः।
अत्र तत्त्व अप्रकाश एव इति एव शब्दस्य प्रयोगः कृतः इति मन्ये।
साक्षात् तत्त्वनिर्णय उद्देशः नास्ति इत्येव एव शब्दस्य अर्थः इति स्यात्।
तत्त्व अप्रकाश इति स्थापितं खलु, तत्त्व अप्रकाश एव वादजल्पयोः फलं, वादे तावत् तत्त्वप्रकाश एव फलम्।
सत्यं, प्रायः तत्र एव शब्दस्य अर्थः मुख्यफलम् इति कृत्वा तत्त्व अप्रकाशः मुख्यफलम् इत्युक्तौ जयादिकं मुख्यफलं वादे तु तत्त्वनिर्णय एव मुख्यफलम् अवान्तरफलत्वेन जयादिकमपि भवेत् वादे तत्त्वनिर्णयोऽपि भवेत् जल्पवितण्डयोः अवान्तरफलत्वेन इत्येव विरोधपरिहारः कर्तव्यः इति भाति. Okay, so taking this discussion forward, this is the definitions given by Madhvacharya in his works on Katha that are trying to make some specific component level analysis on what is Vada, what is Jalpa, and what is Vitanda. So on each word is critical here. Vada is done with the objective of direct resolution of truth. Sakshat Tattva Nirnayam Uddishya Pravritta Katha. So the objective is to know truth, and the truth can be known in two ways, directly and indirectly. See, when you are trying to do Vitanda, you are trying to rebut the opponent's view. Through indirectly, that is wrong, therefore the opposite of that should be true, but you haven't revealed what that opposite view exactly is. But there is one general indication of what must be true. But I mean, so for example, if the discussion is between the, say, reality of this world, so one position is on the reality of this world, there is an opponent who proves in the course of debate that position you have taken on the reality of this world is flawed. So even though the reasons for non-reality are not discussed, indirectly, because the reality has been demolished, so as an implication, non-reality becomes kind of a truth of that debate. So the resolution of truth, though, so the difference is this. So one is taking the position of reality, the other is not saying what the position is, but is opposing. So through this opposition, and if that person wins, then the non-reality is indicated, though not established. So Tattva Nirnaya, or the resolution of truth, is happening, but in an indirect way. So therefore, it is not a Vada, it is Vitanda. Whereas in Vada, you have to directly establish what the truth is. So you show your point, you show the problems in the opponent's point. Whoever has better logical rigor wins. So there is the objective of direct resolution. So the two words, objective and direct, both are important. The reason why we are saying objective is because Jalpa can also do direct resolution of truth, because Jalpa also has my position and the opponent's position, my counter, opponent's counter. So there is a direct resolution of truth possible if they are not using chala, jati, and those tricky methods. Because if you remember my initial discussion, Jalpa uses tricks that do not necessarily lead to truth, but it is not necessary that you have to always use those tricks. You may be following the right path also. So if you're using the right methodology, then even though your intention, even though your objective is truth, your objective is victory, you're also arriving at truth. But because you're not doing it with the intention of truth seeking, we are calling that Jalp. Your intention is victory, but it may also lead to Tattva Nishchaya. It may also lead to truth seeking, in fact, direct truth seeking. Whereas Vitanda, it may lead to indirect truth seeking. But the primary goal in Vada is truth seeking. Primary goal in Jalpa is victory. Primary goal in Vitanda is victory without revealing your position. Right. Victory where trick is also allowed, but you don't necessarily use tricks in Jalpa and Vitanda.
Vitanda, I'm saying that victory with trick. Can I say in short words?
Victory with trick.
Trick.
So that's what I meant. So trick is not necessary. So by trick, I mean some misrepresentation, some wrong. So, but that is not a necessary. You may use, but you don't necessarily use. I mean, if you are winning by fair means, why do you use an unfair mean? Just that the game allows for unfair means is what we are saying in definition. But in a specific Vitanda or a specific Jalpa, it is not necessary that both parties use those tricks or unfair means. They may use fair means also and lose, fair means also and win. So you can't use that in the definition as a necessary condition, but as an allowed condition. Even if you use trick, you're still allowed to do that. You can't do that in Vada.
Positive
Correct,
answers.
correct. So this is trying to summarize that whole idea. Is that visible? I hope so. So basically it's talking about what are the kinds of people involved, what is the exact process, and what is the purpose in Vada, Jalpa, and Vitanda. So in Vada, these are people without any mental impurities. Even seeking victory is a kind of not an elevated state where, so your goal is just to know the truth. So that is the notion of a nirdushta manas vikti. That sajjana is one who doesn't have any doshas in his mind. And what does he do? He does pramana tarkabhyam eva. That is, he uses right approaches of pramana, that is positive pramanas and negative pramanas. By negative, I mean those used to refute, and the others that are used to establish. So pramana, sadhana pramanas and dushana pramana. So use both of them, and you do swapaksha sadhana, parapaksha dushana. That is, you establish your position and negate the opponent's position. And what is your goal? Sakshat tattva nirnaya, direct resolution of truth. So if that is your objective, then such a debate is called Vada. In Jalpa, both are eligible to know each other's position. Tattvajnana yogyaha. So there is no threat imposed by an opponent, which happens in Vitanda. Whereas in Jalpa, both are revealing their positions. However, in the process, there is a difference. Pramana tarkabhyam chaladina cha. So you are trying to prove your point by both fair and unfair means. And you're also trying to defeat the opponent by both fair and unfair means. Why? Because your goal is paraparabhava. Your objective is to win. Your objective is not to seek truth. It may so happen that you may also find truth in the process. That's an avantara phala. If you are not using chala, that is unfair means, but you are only doing using the fair means, you may end up with truth also, but your goal is to win. So that is Jalpa. Whereas in Vitanda, there are two kinds of people. One who consider that they should not reveal their position. The other thinks that, well, they have to propagate their idea. So one person is revealing their position, the other person is only finding fault in it. So here, pramana tarkabhyam chaladina cha. Here also, because the goal is to win, you use both fair and unfair means if need be. And one of them will not do swapaksha sthapana. Ekatra swapaksha sthapana hinaha. And what is the objective? Tattva niguhana sahitaha paraparabhavaha. So your intention is to win while your position is not revealed. So that's the overall idea of Vada, Jalpa, and Vitanda. So if there are any questions, we can take for 5 minutes and then probably break for 15 minutes. And then what are the kinds of errors and how people win over an opposite party, the nigrahasthanas, so that we will discuss in the next part. Yes.
Mahoday, since tea and snacks have been arranged, so maybe we can take the questions as a part of informal discussion.
Sure. Okay.
So thank you, sir, for this session. We'll be continuing in another half an hour.
Sure.
So I request all of you to please take tea and snacks, which is made available outside.